Here's the big three: Dick York, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Agnes Morehead. I really want to talk about Agnes during this episode. I haven't talked about him yet. So Richard Baer was a writer who wrote a lot of episodic television. Um, he did The Munsters, Leave It to Beaver, of course, Bewitched. But this is so awesome when she's all of a sudden real powerful. And look at Agnes. That's real Agnes who you just saw there. That's what I want to talk about. Watch her. I love these big, you know me, you've heard it. I love the big magic. The original Tabitha was played by twins Diane Murphy and Erin Murphy, but they weren't identical twins. And once they started looking alike, they had to pick one, and they picked Erin.
Bewitched, you got me in your spell.
Let's chat about Bewitched. I have a huge prediction to make about this episode of Let's Chat About Bewitched. I am going to bet that I'm going to make some enemies because I'm going to give my opinion on something. I often don't really give my opinion on something. I like to stick to facts, but the weird thing is I've been doing this behind the scenes Bewitched thing long enough that I just feel like I'm connecting a lot of dots. I'm going to talk about that. I first want to talk about this shot of Dick York in the chair there. I've never seen that shot with him in that chair and the little foyer behind him. I really like it. I just like the framing of that for what it's worth. Again, I'm just kind of a behind-the-scenes set guy. If you've never been here, I'm watching a monitor there that shows what you're watching here, and we're just chatting about Bewitched and chatting about some behind-the-scenes things that I know from cast members and crew members that I've met, and I'm learning a ton from you guys as we go along because you guys know so much. So here's the big three: Dick York, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Agnes Morehead. I really want to talk about Agnes during this episode. I'll explain why. And and Erin Murphy. The big 3.5, Erin Murphy. Of course, the original Tabitha was played by twins Diane Murphy and Erin Murphy, but they weren't identical twins. And once they started looking alike, they had to pick one, and they picked Erin, who is just absolutely adorable. Almost grabbed Agnes's earrings there. I wonder if she did, and playing with her necklace. And she's just adorable. I just think she does such an amazing job as this teeny little actress kid. Just so disciplined. I'm always amazed at some of the scenes where I see her because, again, this stuff is done over and over and takes time. And even though they did bang it out, don't get me wrong, which is a little bit of what I'm going to talk about here. All right. But before I do that, we're about to get to the opening credits where the reason I'm holding this is I'll tell you what episode. This is the episode about Endora losing her powers and the dodo bird, if you know what I'm talking about. So long and short of the episode backstory is Endora's going to lose her powers. They transfer to someone else because she has apparently come in contact with the dodo bird. And we really get to see Agnes act in a way that I just so appreciate her versatility and her discipline as an actress. See, look at there. She's looking very feeble and really does during this episode. Just not the strong, bitter. Let's underline that word and put it aside. The bitter Endora. All right, here are the opening credits. Let me tell you about this episode. This is called Allergic to Macedonian Dodo Birds. It's the 118th episode they've ever shot, so they've been doing this for a while. We're in season 4, episode 11. It was filmed on September 14th, 1967. I'm just giving you a lot of facts here. I know I don't like to get wrapped up in a lot of these facts, but it was broadcast on November 16th, 1967. So when I say they cranked it out, editing and everything, 1 month and 2 days after filming it, it was already being broadcast. All right. Also, just let me quickly talk about the writer there, Richard Baer. I don't know that I've ever talked about him before because I like to talk about the writers and things. I wanted to read something else from there. I'll see if I can remember. I do remember. I haven't talked about him yet. So Richard Baer was a writer who wrote a lot of episodic television. He did The Munsters, Leave It to Beaver, of course, Bewitched. And the way it worked in Hollywood and worked to this day, a lot of what writers do is they study shows and they submit script after script after script to a bunch of shows, just hoping good someone likes one of their scripts and says, yeah, we'll do that episode. I've mentioned it before. I think they're incredibly underrated. I think they're incredibly underpaid, because let's face it, none of this happens without the writer. And we've seen on writer strikes how things close down. All right, let me just pop back into the episode before I start talking about what I want to talk about during this episode. So here's Endora. She's lost her powers. Look how good she is. Look how she pulls up that blanket. I just love it. Have we ever seen Endora in bed? We've seen her in a bubble bath. Do we ever see Endora in bed other than this one episode? Great trivia question. All right, here we go. These two just work for me. I've said it a lot. We know their relationship strained. Would you know in a million years the way Liz is touching him and talking to him and Darren sticking into his character? I just think they're really super, super good at what they do. All right. So, by the way, this might go without saying, but sometimes a lot of people don't think this stuff through. So here they are in the second floor hallway. But of course, they're not on a second floor. Not that I have been on sets that have 2, 3, and 4 floors, sometimes on a sound stage. This isn't, while this would be considered a sound stage, I've been and worked on sound stages that are just gigantic. They're like airplane hangars. And I have been on sets where there are actual floors, but they're a nightmare to shoot on because you have to, build platforms for the cameras and all the lights and the crew and, so almost everything, 99% of things that are shot are all shot on the same floor. All that to say, that lobby, that hallway on the second floor is really on the first floor of the studio. Look through the door there. So they're on Warner Ranch here. You see how, that's a hollow house. That's just a facade. But notice how they just set up a bench, and what was that, a little tree? Sometimes they only have that lamp that you sometimes see in the lobby, that hurricane lamp with 2 green globes. Of course, it doesn't match. I have seen it a couple times where they almost look like they had a little faux set of stairs there. But that is not the set through there. That is nothing through there. But sometimes they'll just add a little something. So here we go. Agnes in her messed up hair. I love when she tries to pick up this pot of coffee. Oh, I want to talk about that pot of coffee for a minute because I'm weird and I've talked about it in the past. I know you're like, oh, I'm so glad I watched this episode. Well, we're going to talk about a pot of coffee because, so if you see that pot of coffee behind there, they use that a lot. And I actually asked the question a few Bewitched chats back, was there really such a thing? I mean, I wasn't, I don't, have a viable memory for this time period. So it looks like there's like a little candle or one of those little dishes they use for catering that smell like fuel. You see the little fuel? You see it? I know you're watching it on a little screen there. Maybe you can see it better there. But they always have that little pot of coffee, and I want to know if that's a thing. Clearly it must have. They didn't build that for part of the... Watch her try to pick this up. Uh-oh. It's too heavy. It's heavy. She's so good. But did they really does anybody today use a Bunsen burner? Isn't it? No, a Bunsen burner is a chemical lab thing. Whatever it's called. Does anybody have a glass coffee pot where they set it in the middle? Usually it's in the middle of the table with a candle keeping it warm. I don't know. That just doesn't sound like a thing to me, but it's fascinating enough. All right, so we're zapping in Bernard Fox, who plays Dr. Bombay, who we've actually not talked a lot about on Bewitched Chats. I'm going to have to do that in a one coming up. And one of the reasons why is so far we've pretty much concentrated on season 1 to season, not pretty much. When I really think about it, we haven't done any of the later episodes. And that's so my fault because I like this cast. Again, it's not that I don't like Dick Sargent, and maybe I was just super hooked on here, but also, you might know, oh, and it's on that piece of paper that I just threw away and someone took away. When Dick Sargent came on as Darren in Bewitched, I think their ratings immediately dropped. I think the number's 14 places. So if you're more familiar with music, look how they're walking that way. There are no stairs there. Do you notice? How could they walk that way and keep going unless those stairs move? So weird things I look at, I know. But yeah, it didn't go well for Dick Sargent. So I guess I'm not the only one. Their ratings dropped instantly when he was recast. And since I'm there, I have time. I'm looking at how much time's left. Wait, since I'm there, what was I going to say? All right, let me just go into the Agnes Morehead thing because that's part of since I'm there. So, we have always heard, it's been talked about on Bewitched Chat in the past, that Agnes Morehead actually liked Dick York despite all of his problems. And someone actually posted, is the first time I read it, in the comments here. That's why these comments are so powerful. Read them, you'll learn more. You think you're learning more something from me, you're going to learn a ton from the people in the comments. Someone posted, I forget their name, maybe Carrie Keene, who's a regular poster. Maybe it was him. I don't know. It was one of you guys who just know everything. That Agnes Morehead made Dick Sargent cry because she was so mean to him. And did I see it in an interview or writing where she said, I don't like change. And she just never accepted Dick Sargent. So that's what I want to talk about. Let's talk about Agnes, but I also want to watch her performance here because I did this with Dick York as well. It might sound like I'm lambasting these people and just shading them and saying all kind of negative things about them. But what I'm doing truly is so admiring them as actors that I'm just fascinated by the kinds of people they were, the good and the bad. I may have said it before, as someone who's worked with everybody, it feels like there are very few people I haven't worked with in this industry. Actors as a role are just not normal people. They're not. And actors as a role are just weird people. They just are, as are music people as well, I think. Because look, in order to stand in front of the camera like this all the time and put yourself out there, I don't know, you just can't be a normal person. You just would not survive the constant rejection, the constant criticism, the constant, you didn't get the part, you got the part. I don't care how big you are. Think of the biggest star out there, and you'll see when a big movie comes out how many people wanted that part, but only one got them. And they're big names who didn't get them. It just messes with their head, and they're already messed up anyway because they were willing to put themselves out there. Look at this. This is a big pyrotechnic right here. I love this. I'm going back to the episode here. Okay, so what happens here is Aunt Clara, Marion Lorne, has, through the atmospheric continuum, for lack of a better way of saying it, inherited Endora's powers because she's lost her powers. Dr. Bombay says when something like this happens, I think I know what it is or whatever, they usually transfer to another family member, and they're standing there saying, who could it be? And all of a sudden, with big flourishes, Aunt Clara comes in with all this power. That's why there had to be big pyro, just to show that now she's powerful, because typically she's the bubbling, dwindling witchcraft person. Sadly, in real life here, just as a fact, about 5 months from now, from them shooting this, did I say September? 5 months around that area, Marion will pass away. This is one of the last episodes she will have ever done. But look how good she looks and how well she's doing. But this is so awesome when she's all of a sudden real powerful. And look at Agnes. That's real Agnes, who you just saw there. That's what I want to talk about. Watch her. I love these big, you know me, you've heard it. I love the big magic. I always think about these things, imagine. Who is that dude? Does anybody know who that waiter is? He's in everything. He's in everything. I want to know who he is. One of you guys have got to know who he is. He's always an extra. I think he's even had a line a time or two, but he is constantly in Bewitched episodes. Again, that's the Bill Asher that I know. He liked to work with people he was comfortable with, who would do well. Once again, Agnes showing her incredible versatility. Her and Dick York in this scene, where she once waited on at her pillow adjust and all that stuff. All right, so let me talk about Agnes here and finally get to what I started with. I have come to the conclusion, knowing that I'm going to make a lot of enemies, that Agnes was just a super unhappy, difficult person to work with. Why do I say that? All right, let me just connect the dots while we're watching this. First of all, from what I heard from Bill, again, if you don't know, I know it's the same old song. I knew Bill Asher, the creator, director, producer of Bewitched, Liz Montgomery's husband. He told me a lot of things. Um, I wasn't, a lot of times we were just hanging out, eating dinner, whatever. So I wasn't sitting there with a notepad thinking umpteen years later I'd be sitting here talking about behind the scenes with Bewitched. I was just, kind of, though, don't get me wrong, I'm not putting us on the same level. He's like a giant in the industry, and I was a little peon in the industry. But nonetheless, we work in the same industry, and sometimes we talk about that stuff, and sometimes we wouldn't. But he really enjoyed talking about Bewitched a lot. It's not like I had to constantly pry him. But you've heard me say, and it's been reported a lot, that when they started the series, um, they cast Dick York and Elizabeth Montgomery very quickly, but they just couldn't find Mother. They were in a department store in New York City, as in Liz and Bill. It was specifically Bloomingdale's, as I think someone asked. They were in Bloomingdale's in Manhattan, saw Agnes shopping at a makeup counter. I say that because I got a comment. Agnes didn't work at it because I said saw Agnes at a makeup counter, and someone said Agnes didn't work at a makeup counter. She was a big star by then. I know she didn't work at the makeup counter. She was shopping. Liz went up and said, "Would you be Mother?" She said no a lot. She just didn't want to do it. She had a very poo-poo, condescending view of television, still very much in its infancy. They went back to her, they went back to her, they went back to her. Money, 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 money. Ultimately talked because Agnes liked to go shopping. She liked to have parties. Agnes liked money. She eventually said yes. Very reluctantly, with big rules. In the beginning, she would only work 1 day a week. As time went on, she'd work a little more, but still very limited. So I already knew this, and then I also knew from cast members and maybe some crew members as well that Agnes would, for example, refuse to stand in for lighting, for example. You've seen me talk about stand-ins in the past. When they're setting up a scene, they're pulling focus, they're doing the lights. They have people that have their same hair color and the same height, everything, who stand there. Sometimes if an actor's nearby, they'll say, "Here, I'll just do it real quick." Agnes would never do that. I'll often talk about when there are close-ups of people in the close-up, 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 and I'll say, Dick isn't really there. Liz is just talking to either someone holding the script reading to her or a blank space because it's just her and they're not really there. But sometimes an actor will say, "Oh, you know what?" Or one actor will say to another, "What? I think I'll pull the scene off better if you're there. Would you mind just sitting there and really kind of getting into it with me so I can play off you?" And they'll say yes. She wouldn't do it. Agnes had a lot of attitude. Okay, so that's one thing. Agnes had a lot of attitude. She looked very condescendingly down to television, but agreed to do it for the money. That is pretty much standard. So I'm not saying anything controversial or for someone to hate me for at this point. Then there came in late 2023 when I discovered this interview, this incredible interview by this entertainment reporter named Lou, who worked at a San Jose television station, which is posted on my channel called Bewitched Secrets Behind the Scenes #3. I never planned on doing a #2 and #3 and everything, but then these things become unearthed, and there just aren't any interviews with Agnes out there, and very few with Liz. Liz sucked at doing interviews, her words. Agnes just didn't do any interviews because if you watch that interview, she talks about how we should never give people a look behind the scenes. It takes away the magic, and she's not talking about Bewitched magic. She's talking about the magic of performance, whether it's stage, whether it's film, whether it's television. She never felt we had the right to know what goes on behind the scenes. And maybe that sounds harsh, but it's kind of how she was. So my point is, if you watch that interview, I'm sorry, I'm not talking more about the episode. Agnes is just doing such a great job of going in and out of, going from the powerful Endora to the very weak Endora, because she's a brilliant actress. But you watch, look at her now, she's pretending, look, because she's all in. She is all in her acting. Even though she didn't want to do it, she's all in. But if you watch that interview in Bewitched Secrets Behind the Scenes #3, she's bitter. She is not happy. She's mean. Before I was an actor, I was a journalist, and I did a lot of entertainment reporting, and that's what I met so many people, because even way back before I even moved to Hollywood and was doing things out of New York and other places, I interviewed lots and tons of famous people. And when you say interview, you sit with them for a while, you chat, and then you eventually do the interview. And every now and then, look right behind Darren. That's Samantha's stand-in. See her? See that blonde? That is Samantha's stand-in. This is I'm stopping, and that's Darren standing behind the drunk. These same skin tone, same hair color, same height. I'm pointing that out because I just talked about stand-ins and how Agnes wouldn't do her stand-in. I've talked about Agnes' stand-in in Bewitched Scandals. I'm not really trying to refer you to my other videos, but if you watch them, you'll get it, where I show their stand-ins. Endora's stand-in looked exactly like her. Agnes' stand-in looked exactly like her. So I just find it fascinating. They'll often use them as background. That dodo bird is so cheeseball. I'm just so distracted by how awful that is. So disappointed. There are 3 episodes of Bewitched. I know I'm all over the map. That's why I appreciate you guys hanging with me, because obviously this is very ad lib, and I'm doing 3 things at once here: the episode, the behind the scenes, and talk about Agnes. There are 3 episodes of Bewitched where I'm like, oh, come on. How about just don't put them on the air then? The dodo bird, the flying saucer, and the Loch Ness monster. It just doesn't get any worse than that. In order of appearance, the Loch Ness monster, was it Bruce, where Serena, this is late, season 7 or 8 maybe, where they go to Lockerbie, Scotland, where the Loch Ness means lake in Scottish, Loch Ness, Loch Lake, and they're in his underground cave, and it's just so horrible. The third one is this dodo bird, or the second one is this dodo bird. Look, that is so freaking cheeseball. Come on, guys. You could have done something better. I get it. They're doing episodic television. They have to crank this out. But how about just not have a dodo bird then? Or just talk about it or whatever. I don't know. That's just so horrid to me. Horrid. 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 I need to leave it alone. Leave it alone, Barry. Just leave it alone. It's fine. I know. Horrid. Anyway, Dr. Bombay has to pull a dodo feather out of him for a potion that he needs to get Endora's powers back. So anyway, in that interview, and Bewitched Secrets Behind the Scenes number 3, she's just so angry and bitter about everything. And she did so few interviews that we don't really get a look at her. They're interviewing her on the set of Bewitched. I show they're interviewing during the episode in, I think, season 4 or 5. I think 4, where Liz has to float in the air because she lost her powers. And they're wearing the same thing, this Lou Reardon or whatever her name is, Lou from the San Jose TV station. And they're probably thinking this is just local. And I think we get to see who Agnes was. Now she has her powers back. I was just shocked. I was taken back by that interview of how not nice she was. So when I say to myself, as we're rounding out here, I say, poor Liz, man. I think for all intents and purposes, Liz was just a nice, normal person. I do. Now you got Dick, who's showing up, not showing up, has major substance abuse problems. Now you have Agnes, who is just bitter and not, and I will do this, I won't do this. I will do this, I won't do this. Just watch that interview. I don't know that you can disagree with me. This is my opinion. No, just to make it clear, no one ever said, Barry, Agnes was a witch with a bee. She was bitter. She was miserable. She was never happy. But just when I hear what people have told me about her, actually, there was another cast member that I talked to that I've never mentioned before, who was just a day player, who said Agnes went up to her and said, darling, never stand in. They'll never respect you. So she just had all this attitude. But then when I watched that interview, somehow it just connected all the dots for me. All right. Feel free to comment and tell me I'm an a-hole. I just don't think she was a nice person. I don't. I think she was a brilliant actress. So my point is, poor Liz, you got Dick and Agnes from day one, you got I've talked about this in a previous chat. If you haven't seen it, you got a producer who's bipolar and can 1 minute be nice and 1 minute total flip off on you, and who they eventually had to fire because of it. And this is how Bewitched started. And I often talk about how cast members and crew members would say, Liz was very, hands off, very professional. She came, she went to work and left. No wonder. I don't know that they had a chance for it to be a happy place from the very beginning. And it just never got to settle into a happy place, I think. That's what I think. I don't know. Be interested to hear what you think. But Endora, I've mentioned before, the actors that you see on TV or movies are usually the actors they are in real life. Speaking of someone who's met many of them, casting directors always want to cast someone who is like what they seem, because you're going to get the best performances. So here we are with the big three again, Agnes, Liz, and Dick. And that's the end of the episode. Now we're being produced by Bill Asher. So that's it. I don't know. I don't know what you're going to think of everything I just said, but I am very curious. Because oftentimes when I say anything bad about Liz, I'll get, well, I love Elizabeth Montgomery. It's not like I say anything bad, anything slightly shaded. And there are a lot of Agnes Morehead lovers, and I get it. She's a brilliant actress. But that's just the conclusion I've come to. You can let me know what you think. So that's it. So we got more Bewitched chats ahead, so hopefully I can redeem myself. But in the meantime, keep the magic alive, keep the magic in your life. See you next time. Take care.
I never thought my heart could be had, but now I'm caught and I'm kinda glad to be